Hi, Gary.
Hello.
Got it? Yeah, now you can go.
Okay. So I want to thank Tyler, first of all, for letting me use his laser pointer. I forgot mine at home, so I would have been like a scared child up here, you know, quivering without it. I've never given a presentation without it. Never leave home without it. Learned that today. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Nmap. For the people in the back, if you can't hear me, you know, shout something. Okay, good. And if at any point during the talk you can't hear me, just yell like, "Can't hear you," something like that will work just fine. All right, so let's get going. Like I said, my name's Gary McCulley. I'm a consultant at SecureState. I have some certification stuff. I'm on the profiling team at SecureState, which basically means I'm an ethical hacker. I do web applications, security assessments, penetration tests, physical pen tests, war dialing, fun stuff like that. Before I came to SecureState, I worked for a Fortune 500 company. And let's jump right into Nmap.
Gary, I gotta stop you. You got your little sideshow thing up there.
That might be good to kill it. Oh, resume!
There you go.
Good, okay. So now you can read what is Nmap. This is going to be a quick introduction. We're not going to get into too much depth. If I accidentally mix up like things like packet and segment and all those fun networking terminology things, forgive me. So with that, let's get going here. Nmap started as a port scanner. It was released in 1997, and it's free, and it's available on Windows, Linux, Unix, and Mac OS operating systems. Nmap has some really nice features. It acts as a port scanner, version detection, operating system detection, and then Nmap also has this fun little thing called the Nmap scripting engine, which we'll talk a little bit about. There's some really fun stuff you can do with the Nmap scripting engine. So of course, before we can talk about Nmap, since Nmap is, you know, it's a networking tool essentially. We're going to have to talk a little bit about some networking basics at the beginning, and we'll try to go through some of that stuff quickly. For a lot of you, this is probably review. For other people, maybe you'll learn a little bit about some basic networking protocols and things like that. The first protocol I'm going to talk about is the Internet Protocol. It's basically it's the address of a machine, right? IP version 4 is the most common, but eventually, one day in the next 100,000 years, we'll get to IP version 6. We found some fun ways to try to keep Nmap or IP version 4 around for much longer than it probably should be. But eventually, one day, Nmap or IP version 6, you will see. So IP is it's, like I said, it's an address. So if you were going to look at it from like pretend like this house here is one computer and this house here is another computer, IP is the address of that house. So instead of saying 123, Sanity Lane or whatever, you would have 10.0.0.1, and over here you've got 10.0.0.2, and so if you were going to send a packet from 10.0.0.1 to 10.0.0.2, you're going to send it in something send it just like you would an email or a message. I guess you would call it snail mail now, if people actually still use that stuff. So that's IP. Next one we'll talk about very quickly, ICMP. It's mostly used for troubleshooting. It's not typically used to exchange data, although there are some attacks that will use ICMP to try to hide data, but it's not supposed to be used that way. It's mostly used for troubleshooting. So one of the things that ICMP is used for, probably everybody's familiar with ping. Ping is basically very simple. You send out an ICMP ping request, and basically you're yelling, hey, from 10.0.0.1 is going to shout out to 10.0.0.2, are you home? And 10.0.0.2 is going to respond, yep, I am home. So it's a pretty basic type of protocol. And here's how it's going to look. Here's machine 1. It sends an ICMP type 8, which is an echo request to machine 2, and machine 2 just replies and says, yep, I'm online. I'm replying to your request to see if I'm online. So that's how ICMP, one of the uses, common uses for ICMP. The next protocol we'll cover very quickly, TCP, or Transmission Control Protocol. It is connection oriented and it is reliable. So what does that mean? Well, TCP is used to carry the information from machine 1 to machine 2, or from house 1 to house 2. It's represented here by this mail truck here. And so it's going to take the letter that 10.0.0.1 created, and it's going to deliver it to 10.0.0.2. Now, it's reliable. So what it's going to do is, it would be like having the mail carrier actually go up to the house and require a signature before delivering the envelope. It's going to make sure that this house over here actually gets the letter. It's not just going to throw the letter on the front door. It's going to make sure that this house actually gets it. It's not going to just drop it off. So TCP is reliable. And how does that look in the actual computer, like how the computer actually works? Well, this is how it's able to establish reliable connections. When one machine is about to talk to the other machine, what it will do is machine 1 will send a SYN packet over to machine 2. And then machine 2, if it receives the SYN packet, it's going to respond with a SYN-ACK. And then then the first machine is going to finish up the three-way handshake by sending an ACK packet back to the second machine. So at this point here, they both know that they're able to talk to each other, and it's able to start sending data at that point. So that's how it's reliable in that way. And then when it's done talking to the other machine, machine 1 sends a FIN-ACK over to machine 2, and machine 2 says, okay, I acknowledge your FIN-ACK, and I'm going to send my own FIN-ACK, and machine 1 closes the session with its own ACK packet, and at that point, it knows that the conversation is over. So now we're going to go into an in-depth analysis of every single field in TCP, in a TCP packet here. I'm joking. I'm not that crazy. So just so that you have a little bit of an idea of what a TCP packet's going to look like, we're going to actually compare this to a datagram or something that a packet that UDP sends datagram later. So what happens here is you've got your source port and your destination port. You got your sequence number and acknowledgement number, and then here's where all of those flags are actually set, and down here is the data. So you can see that there's quite a few fields in here, and TCP uses these in order for to be able to establish that connection-oriented and reliable type connections. Now we're going to talk about UDP. All right, so TCP, it was connection-oriented, it was very reliable. User datagram protocol, on the other hand, is not connection-oriented and not reliable. So again, if we go back to our mail example, it's like, here's house 1, it wants to send mail to the house 2, and again, it's a transport protocol, so it's going to bring information from house 1 to house 2, but instead of making the person sign for it, it's actually just going to drop it off in the mailbox and just kind of hope that that this person over here actually gets the letter. Now, if you live in a house like mine, you're actually taking a risk here. There's lots of hands that take that letter, and if you're lucky, you'll get that letter. And sometimes you don't ever know until like a month later. Oh, Gary, by the way, here's a letter that you got a month ago, and then I have to go to jail or something because I didn't respond to someone. So TCP is connection oriented. And UDP is not. It just delivers it in hopes that the other house or the other machine gets the information. And how does that look? Well, it just right here takes the data and sends it to the second machine. It's pretty pretty simple. And as you can see, it's a lot simpler than TCP, right? I mean, in TCP you had all those cool flags, and you had the windows, and you had all types of fun fields, and in this you're just getting a source port, a destination port, length, a checksum, and the data. So not a whole lot going on in a UDP datagram is what it's called. All right, and then we're almost done with the networking basics, so just hold on in there for me. Next one we have is ports. Ports are they can either be TCP, they can be UDP. It says basically tells a server what service should read the incoming data, and the standard mapping of port numbers is handled by the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. So I tried to think of the best way to explain a port. And it's kind of like if you it makes sure that your machine is speaking the same language that the machine that you're trying to talk to is going to speak. So have you ever called like a credit card bureau or some place like that, and you start off the phone conversation with, for English, press 1. For Yugoslavian, press 2. Or then actually they don't even say Yugoslav. I mean, they're just like, German, it's just, and then you hear a bunch of different things, and you know that they're telling the other people to press these numbers, but you don't understand what they're saying, so you just press 1 and you'll be good, right? And if you're lucky, the other person on the other line will speak your language. Ports kind of work the same way. It's kind of like if my machine needs to speak to the other machine, it's saying, hey, press 1, and hopefully if I send this information, you'll be able to talk back to me. We'll understand, we'll be speaking the same language here. So some common ports are TCP port 21 is like FTP. You got port 80, which is HTTP. 443 is HTTPS. 3389. You get the point. There's a whole bunch of them, so that's how ports work. Hopefully that was hopefully you guys understood that a little bit if you're not familiar with them.
Which port's like Yugoslavian?
That would be port 70,898.1. It's the only one with the decimal point. So this would kind of be so your browser by default it's going to try to speak with like another machine. If you're connecting to Google, it's going to try to speak to the other machine over port 80, which is HTTP. So if you type www.google.com into your web browser, it's going to know that you're trying to, by default, it's going to try to connect to the second machine using port 80, because that would be where a web server generally is going to listen in. So what happens is, so that you're speaking on the same language, you go over to google.com, and then since it's expecting web traffic generally on port 80, it's going to be able to understand what you're talking about and talk back to you, and that way you can browse the internet, or at least Google. All right, so some of the basic syntax of Nmap. It's Nmap, followed by scan types, followed by options, followed by targets. Targets can be in a number of different formats. Right here, you've got Cedar notation. This is actually one of my favorite formats here. You can actually break up the octets, like a -1 through 255 and 1 to 255. This is one of my favorites. Or you can just keep listing out the IP addresses, and Nmap will understand that as well. And then for you adventurous people out there, Nmap can even pull from a file. So before Nmap, the very first thing that Nmap is going to do is it's going to do host discovery. Host discovery is just that. It's going to find out if the host is alive or if it's not alive. It's the first step generally in scanning. And Nmap uses TCP, UDP, and ICMP for host discovery. The important thing to note about host discovery as we go through these slides is Nmap doesn't care if at this point during host discovery, it's not looking to see if a port is open or not. It is just looking to see if the host is alive. So during host discovery, it's going to go to machine 1. It's going to say, hey, are you awake? And host 1 is going to say, yes, I'm awake. And then it's going to say, okay, well, I'm going to keep note of that, and we're going to scan this host later to see what ports are open. It goes to host number 2 and does the same thing, host number 3. So it's going to keep going, and it's just building a list of machines that are alive at this point. It does this in order for in order to make sure that you're not like there all day long scanning machines, because without host discovery, it's going to go through your whole scan on hosts that might not even be up. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about host discovery. So the first switch for host discovery that Nmap supports is -PS. This is called a SYN ping. It again is just seeing if the host is online, and it determines if the host is online just based off of the response to a SYN packet. So Nmap is going to send the first machine a SYN packet. By default, if you use the -PS switch, it's going to only send it to port 80. So it's going to send a SYN packet to port 80, and based off of the response of the machine to port 80, it's going to decide if the host is offline or online. So I said that the default is port 80, but you can also specify other ports that you want it to try to communicate to the machine on if you're using the -PS command, just by listing out the ports following the PS command like that. So how does it work? Well, for host discovery, here's Nmap, and here's one of the machines in the network. It's going to send a SYN packet to port 80, and if the port is open, it's going to respond with the standard SYN-ACK reply. At that point, Nmap is going to take note and say, okay, this host is online. We can go ahead and continue scanning to see what ports are open on it. And then in order to be friendly and nice, Nmap closes the connection out by sending a reset packet so that it doesn't have a whole bunch of half-open connections over here on this side. If the port is closed, so by default, the way TCP works is if you send a SYN packet to a closed port, it's going to respond with a reset packet. Now, this is, remember, Nmap's not trying to find out if port 80 is open or not. This would actually be a positive response. At this point, since Nmap has received a reset packet, it knows that the host is online, although this port is not open. And then it's able to determine if the host is offline or if port 80 is blocked by it sends a SYN packet to port 80 and it gets no response. And at that point, Nmap says, okay, well, I tried my best to communicate with this person and they don't want to talk to me, so you know what? I'm done with them. I'm done talking to them. So that's kind of how it's going to work for a SYN scan. Here's how here's a SYN. Here's an example of Nmap using the -PS command with port 8080, and then here I decided to scan this range of IP addresses, and you can see that the host is online and has responded to the scan. Now, what you'll see here is although I have told Nmap to look for hosts that are open on port 8080. at this point, it's going to go ahead and do a full SYN scan on the host once it sees if it's open or online or not. By default, Nmap's going to continue with the scanning after it finds out if the host is online. So that's what this output is right here. Now we'll talk about the some of the advantages to the -PS switch. The advantages are with the PS switch, the traffic looks normal, right? I mean, if you want to communicate with another machine and you're trying to establish a connection with the other machine, you're going to send it a SYN packet. So it's going to look like regular, harmless TCP traffic. So it looks just fine. It's reliable for finding open ports because, I mean, most machines are going to respond to a SYN packet. If the port's open, the port's open. It's supposed to be open, and it's going to respond, and you're going to know if the host is online or not. The disadvantages to a SYN scan is that, a SYN ping would be that many firewalls are configured to drop SYN packets destined for closed ports. So if you do a -PS to a server, and that server is blocking port 80, but it has all these other ports open, at that point, Nmap's going to stop the scan, and it's not even going to try to see what other ports are open on that machine. So that's important to know. If you have any questions as we're going along, feel free to raise your hand and ask me any questions as we go. Because I know sometimes there's quite a bit of stuff here, and it might be hard to remember later. The -PA switch. So instead of, with this one, it's again a host discovery switch. Instead of sending a SYN packet, this time we're going to send an ACK packet to port 80 by default. You can also tell it to try to use other ports to try to send ACK packets to other ports other than port 80 by specifying that here. After the PA switch, you just list out the other ports you want to try to perform host discovery on. The host is online, determined by this response to an ACK packet. So the other one was Nmap was sending SYN packets. This time Nmap is sending ACK packets. Something that's important to know about the PA switch is the PA switch will not be able to will not know if a specific port is open or not. That's important to know because an ACK packet is out of band. When you go to connect to Google, you're not going to start your communication with Google sending in an ACK packet. So since it's out of band, it's going to respond with a reset packet. It's ACK for host discovery. You'll always get either a reset packet or it just won't respond at all. Again, just lets you know if the ports are not blocked. And we'll talk about that a little bit more a little bit later on. The advantages. So when firewalls are configured to drop SYN packets, a lot of people don't configure their firewalls to drop out-of-band ACK packets. So if your -PS switch is not working, go ahead and give your or -PA switch is not working. You can use the -PS or vice versa. And then finally, the default host discovery option is the -SP switch. So if you don't specify a switch when you're performing an Nmap scan, it's going to automatically try to use this SP switch here. SP is a ping scan. It's just seeing again if the host is online. It's going to do this by default. It's going to send a ICMP echo request to the other machine, and it's also going to send a SYN packet or an ACK packet to port 80, depending on the operating system that you're using and the level of privilege. So again, right here, Nmap -SP followed by the targets to scan. The advantage is it's quick. Disadvantage is it may miss machines that are online, right? If port 80 is not open, or if the machine is not configured to respond or to ICMP echo requests, then Nmap assumes that the host is not online and it will not continue scanning that host. So those are the advantages and disadvantages to that. All right, the list scan, it's basically a sanity check. No packets are sent to the machines that you're scanning supposedly here. It's just like a good sanity check. So what's going to happen is down here you do -SL followed by these IP addresses, and Nmap is just going to list out each of the IP addresses you scan that you would have scanned in a sequential order. So it's nice, especially if you're not real good with subnetting, to throw a Cedar notation in there and do a -SL to make sure that you're scanning, or that you're going to scan the right range before you go ahead and kick your scan off. The disadvantages, advantages, it's a nice sanity check. Disadvantage, it never checks to see if the host is online. So that's a pretty big disadvantage, right? And then the final host discovery option is that I'm going to talk about is a -PN option. This one tells Nmap skip host discovery phase. Assume every machine that I provide you in the targets list is online and just scan them all. Advantage, it makes sure every machine is going to be scanned. The disadvantage is it can take a very long time. If you're scanning like 10.0 to 10.1 to 255 and 10.1 to 255. I mean, you're going to be there all day. It's not going to check to see if it's online. It's just going to scan every machine. So not a good idea if you're looking to get home that night. The first one we talked about, so we kind of went over host discovery. Now we'll quickly go over port scanning. So with port scanning, you're going to try to find out what ports are open, and what ports are closed on the vulnerable machine. So we're going to talk about the -SS switch. By default, or this is Nmap's default scan type. It's called a SYN scan. And it finds what ports are open based off of responses to SYN packets. Kind of like our host discovery, but instead of just going to port 80, it's going to try by default the top 1,000 TCP ports, or you can give it your own list of ports you want to scan, like in this type of notation here, a -P followed by the port. So if the port is open, what happens is Nmap is going to send a SYN packet over here to this machine here. This machine responds with a SYNAC, and Nmap closes the connection with reset. And at this point, Nmap knows that port 80 is open because this machine responded to a SYNAC packet, or a SYN packet. So it's going to go through, and for every port that you tell it to scan, it's going to do the same check right here for every single port. It's pretty basic syntax here. If you left out the -SS, it's going to do this scan anyway, because this is Nmap's default scan. If the port is closed, you send a SYN packet to the port 80 is closed, it responds with a reset. And you know that the port is closed at that point. And again, right here, this time I'm actually specifying, I'm telling it to scan all these machines in this list, but only see if port 21 is open. And in this case, port 21 is closed. And then finally, you've got a filtered status. So you've got an open status, you've got a closed status, and you've got a filtered status. You send a SYN packet over here, and this machine just never responds to you. It falls into oblivion. And then it's time to scan the next port. And that's what filtered status looks like. Filtered service FTP. The advantages of the -SS option would be, again, it looks like normal TCP traffic. And the disadvantages, many firewalls are configured to drop SYN packets destined for closed ports. So you might get a lot of filtered statuses. The -SA would be, instead of the SYN scan, you get this is called a ACK scan. So it's going to build a list of, now the important thing to note about this one is, Nmap is only going to see what ports are filtered and what ports are not filtered. It does not actually tell you 100% if the port is is open or not. The reason for this is because you're sending an out-of-band packet. You're going to start the scan off with an ACK packet to port 80. Well, it's out of band. It's not a SYN packet. So it's going to do, this machine, whether that port is open or closed, is always going to respond with the reset packet in this case. And then over here, you just send an ACK packet, and if it's filtered, you get no response. It goes into oblivion. So ACK scans only tell you what ports are filtered and what ports are not filtered. So in that case, you can see that the port is filtered. And then the -SA switch. So the advantages, when firewalls are configured to drop SYN packets, they at least many times will allow ACK packets through. And it lets you know what ports are blocked by the firewall, what ports are not blocked by the firewall. And the disadvantages, of course, is since it is an out-of-band packet, many firewalls are configured just to drop out-of-band packets, so the packet may never reach that port if it's open or not. All right, then we're going to keep going here. Next one we're going to talk about is UDP scans. Compared to TCP scans, these are going to take a very long time to run. There are different statuses. The different statuses of a UDP scan are going to be not open, open filtered, closed, or filtered. And the syntax is going to be Nmap-SU to this range of IPs here, or you can specify specific ports. I recommend specifying specific ports. If you're going to scan like a Class C, let me just give you an example. I tried to scan one box with this -SU flag here, and we're talking about 15-20 minutes in some cases plus. They're not very fast. The reason for that is UDP scans are not connection oriented. So with a TCP scan, you throw the packet out, you send your SYN packet, you're going to get your either your reset or you're going to get a SYNAC, or a SYNAC. But in the UDP case, there's that machine a lot of the time never even responds to you. So you don't know if the packet made it through or not. It's a lot of waiting. This is actually if you're actually going to try to find out the UDP, like the version of the software running on the port that has UDP service on it, you can do the -SUV. One thing that's important to note about this -SUV option is you're going to have a higher rate of finding open ports, open UDP ports. The reason for this is if you do the -SU flag, by default, Nmap is just going to send a UDP packet, but it's not actually going to try to make sure that the correct data is in that UDP packet for the specific service you're trying to talk to. So if you're trying to speak to a machine on port UDP port 123, Nmap is just going to say, okay, here's a UDP packet, all the data is going to be blank, I'm just going to throw it at this port and see if I can get a response back. So that's not the best way of handling that. with the -SUV, it's going to send lots of packets to port 123, each of them with specific data that is specific to NTP, or Network Time Protocol, and actually be able to say, okay, well, this is this specific implementation of NTP. So in addition to finding out if NTP is really online or not, you're going to even get a little bit of version information from it as well. The disadvantage is it does take longer than the regular UDP scan. So the way the UDP scan works with the -SU option, it's going to send a UDP packet over to, or datagram to this machine over here. We'll say to port 161. By default, it's just going to be garbage data. There's nothing in here is going to even resemble a datagram that's specific to SMB. By default, it's just going to be garbage data that's sent over here. If this machine responds, then it knows that the port is open. This is the only type of scan with an open filtered status. The reason for that is, since it's malformed SNMP traffic and it sends it to port 161, if it doesn't get a response, it doesn't know if it's because it's malformed, if it's a malformed packet, or if there's a firewall in place. So it just doesn't know if it's open or closed or what's going on. So it gives it this open/filtered status. If the port is closed, it will say that the port is closed if it receives an ICMP port unreachable error, which is type 3, code 3. And then it will know if the port is filtered if it gets any of these ICMP unreachable errors, which is type 3, codes 1, 2, 9, 10, and 13. Here you can see I practiced what I preach because I got too bored of waiting for a default UDP scan to run, so I said only check to port 123 and see if that's open. You'll see right here it just tells you NTP is open, and when it hits this box here. Now you'll see though that if I use the -SUV, it actually gives you some information about the NTP server, some more specific information there. So the advantages of using the SU switch is it's faster than the SUV. Yeah. And the disadvantage is no version information. And then with -SUV, it provides specific version information. It identifies more ports that are actually open because it's trying to give it legitimate data to respond to. And but the disadvantage is it's slower than the UDP scan. All right, so next thing we'll talk about. So in addition to performing host discovery and finding out what ports are actually open or closed, Nmap is also going to can perform operating system detection. So what it does is Nmap identifies what operating system is running on the machine you're scanning, and it does this by sending the machine a series of 15 TCP, UDP, and ICMP probes. Based off of the responses from those probes, Nmap is able to take all the attributes and the different properties of those packets, and it matches them with attributes in a database of machines that's already identified as like Windows or Linux or Mac in the past. Let me show you like an example. So right here you have this machine here has Nmap running on it. It sends it all of these packets. It gets miscellaneous responses to all of these packets it sends, and then it compares all of these responses and all of the attributes in the packets and datagrams and stuff like that to its database and finds out what operating system is running on this machine over here. So for example, one of the many checks that Nmap performs is this. It performs this integrity of returned UDP data check. By default, if 300 Cs are in the data area right here of a UDP packet, that's considered like valid. And if anything other than 300 Cs is in this data area here, then it's considered invalid. So what Nmap does is it says, okay, well, all of these operating systems respond with 300 Cs, and all of these operating systems do not respond with 300 Cs. So we know that it must fall within this group of operating systems. And it does that with lots and lots of data. Right here you can see an example of the -O switch here, and it actually says that it's running Linux. And then next thing would be, we're almost done, so we just are going to talk about a couple more quick things with Nmap here. So next thing that Nmap can do is service detection for, we already talked about service detection for UDP scans. Well, it can also perform service detection for TCP scans as well. So it uses the response from a particular port to find the version of the service. The version engine by default is going to be the -SU or SV here. SV flag is going to try to find out specific versions of software running on the open ports in this range. So for example here, you can see I used the -SUV or SV flag, and you can see that it didn't only find that port 22 is open, but it gives you all the specific information about port 22. And the same thing with port 80. Over here on port 8080, it shows that Apache is running, the version of Apache, and a little bit more information. So how does it do this? Well, one of the basic techniques that it will use, and this is not the only way that Nmap does this, is like banner grabbing. So right here, I've made a raw connection to port 8080, and you can see I just put an A in there, which is not even valid HTTP data. Hit enter a couple times, and look at this. This banner right here is the same banner that the Nmap returned. And then you can see the same deal with port 22. Again, I made my raw connection here to port 22. I just hit enter a couple times, and I've got the specific banner information that Nmap returns. So Nmap's going to perform these types of checks on all the ports that it finds to be open, but it also has much more advanced ways of finding, like these are very easy to find these versions, but Nmap will do a little bit more advanced version detection. By default, the -SC is going to, so that was version detection. The last thing we'll talk about is the scripting engine. Nmap scripting engine, by default, if you use the -SC, it's going to run through a series of scripts for every open port that it finds. What's nice about the scripting engine is it can help automate networking tasks. So there's scripts out there to find what machines in your environment have SSL version 2 running on them. So if you specify that specific script and tell Nmap every box that has HTTP open on it, HTTPS, try to find out if it's running SSL version 2, and then come back and let me know. So it's a nice scripting engine. You can either use the -SC command. It's going to run through all the default scripts on ports that it finds are open, or you can specify very specific scripts to use by using this -- script option here. So for example here, I scanned this machine here, telling it to look for anonymous FTP. This is the anonymous FTP script, and it comes back and tells me that anonymous FTP is in fact running on this box here. This one here, I'm telling it to tell me the information it has regarding NTP information, and it comes back and gives me this information here. One thing to note is, if you'll notice here, I use this -SU flag here. If I'm telling it to run a UDP scan against port 123 and then using a script that's specific to UDP, If I had not done this right here, it never would have returned this, this NTP information. So if the reason for that is scripts that are specific to UDP will not execute if you're running a TCP specific scan, and vice versa. And then right here is the default, the -SC. So every port that it finds, it's going to run a series of default scripts against and just return a bunch of information at the end from those scripts. And that's what that -SC command does.
Can you use the results of one step for like the next step? So basically you do implement, okay.
Yeah, that's what Nmap appears to do, especially with the scripting engine. So what it's going to do is it's going to find what ports are open. If they're TCP like ports are specific to TCP, then it will go ahead and run those scripts that are TCP specific against those ports. And then if, because it never sees if any UDP ports are open, it's never going to run those UDP specific scans. The scripting engine has a lot of really nice scripts out there built into Nmap right now. This one here, SMB Check Bones.NSE, this will check for MS08067 in your environment. The reason I bring this up is because I'm a pen tester and we see MS08067 everywhere, even today. This is going to make you a lot more secure if you run this against your entire environment. I would recommend running this against your whole network and making sure that you have that patch out there, because this is a very easily to exploit vulnerability, missing patch out there, and running this it's not going to take you that long in most cases, and I would highly recommend it.
Hey Gary, how old's that patch?
MS08, it's a couple years. It's pretty old.
What can you do when they're missing it?
You can exploit the operating system and take control of the box.
The remote root.
Yes, yes.
Just want to hear you say it.
Now, of course, it's also going to check for SMB version. You can use one that checks for SMB version 2. And of course, no talk would be complete without throwing a shout out to SSL. So SSL version 2 script and SSL enum ciphers for all of you who have to pass your ASV scans. I would recommend running these in your network before having your next ASV scan performed. Hopefully you've got those knocked out by now. This right here, FTP Anonymous, SNMP Brute, there's all types of really cool, fun scripts out there that could run against your network. And that's it. Any questions? Yes?
When you go on a pen test, what's your default scans that you start with? Do you throw all these switches at them, or do you
No. Generally, when I start a pen test, I'm going to try to look for specific high target ports. Ones that I get in a lot with. Especially web services and port 21, and I'll first do a quick breeze over a big network and with my top 10 favorite ports in it, and then I'll let Nmap do a full scan then while I'm targeting those boxes to tell me everything that's out there. Then if I'm going to use, when I perform the UDP scan, I'm only going to give it very specific ports because our pen tests don't last like 15 years. so I'll tell it, look for very specific ports. And then if I'm going to use UDP scans, I'll generally use the -SUV because it's going to provide me more reliable results in the end than the regular SU flag.
And for the scripts that you had, like the SMB version 2, you run that. How is that significant?
SMB version 2 is outdated, and there are exploits out there for SMB version 2. It's an outdated version of SMB, so you should upgrade that in your environment. Microsoft
is run that? Is that mostly Linux or?
No, that's mostly most Windows. If you're going to find it, it's going to be in the Windows boxes.
Version of Windows?
All of them?
It can be in all of them. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a newer,
There's a group policy section that you can disable.
yeah.
Oh, is that like the NTLM authentication, or I don't understand?
That means file sharing.
Yeah, it's like file sharing and stuff, but it also, you can pull back all types of information from SMB. If you're using like a Windows 2000 environment, you might have to have like that open a lot of times for the different file shares and communication protocols, but
It's service message block. It was developed so printers could talk to it initially, and then that ultimately evolved into like the Samba project. So
You probably got something running it. You probably have a lot of something running it.
yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, I was looking at a site, I don't know, a year ago or so, where they had registry settings so that you could basically fool something like this into thinking that you were running an operating system other than what you're actually running. Do you have any experience of that, or is it worth doing, or is it just a waste of time?
I believe your pen tester's messages.
Yeah. I mean, you can run that type of software. I mean, it might make it a little bit more frustrating, but I mean, I depending on the services and stuff that are running on the box, generally the pen tester is still going to be able to figure out what's running on the operating system. But I mean, it's security through obscurity, right? I mean, it might make it a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, you're better off fixing problems than trying to hide them.
Any other questions? All right.
All right, well, thank you.
We'll take a 10-minute break and come back for intelligent fuzzy hashing for